No matter who you are, if you are a melanin dominant human being, an African, a Muntu, a member of the Bantu race, you have no freedom from African historical trauma. It is a matter of degree and how its impact over and around you is affecting your psychology and your consciousness. But there are ways to mitigate and reduce its adverse impact. You may think that the richest woman on earth, Oprah Winfrey, will have a better reception when she went to do some shopping in Switzerland. She was abused, but eventually she was the one to apologize for the abuse she suffered. Also, African leaders suffer racism at the highest level in the United Nations. You see here Ronald Reagan, one of the worst, silent and quiet racist president to ever walk the earth in America, laughed at African diplomats saying that they felt uncomfortable wearing shoes. Nixon also was laughing at that. So, how can you mitigate and reduce its adverse impact of historical trauma that we suffer as melanin dominant human beings? Because there is proof that every melanin dominant human being, Muntu, a member of the Bantu race, has no freedom from African historical trauma, and that the general mass and their mentality and their spirituality is like they are possessed by another spirit that controls and runs their life. Because despite all the evidence that you can give them that Christianity, Islam and Judaism enslaved them, continues to enslave them, destroys their personhood, some of them will jump up and say, I love you, Jesus. And some will teach and preach that there is no God and only Allah and Muhammad, his apostle. As for Black Hebrew Israelites, they continue to believe and to think that they suffer because of a slave mentality of slavery that was promised them in the book of Deuteronomy. But if you read Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, you find that the Islamic slave trade, which is one of the worst and the longest one, is not mentioned there. They don't even talk about it, these Hebrew Israelites. These basic steps to minimize this mental terror has eluded the majority, even our leaders. They still continue to kiss and love Jesus, like the Zambian president here, former Zambian president, the late, kissing a European Jesus, continue to promote European borders in Africa. This is our leaders. And many of them readily adopt the colonizer enslaver culture and language. Like these new leaders in Senegal, they dump the French as official language and then adopt Arabic, forgetting that the Muslims enslaved us first, and there's a history, a long history of Muslims, Arabs enslaving melanin dominant human beings. Then they teach us to go and pray to these gods who brought about this perennial, disgusting, subtle, historical, chronic trauma. What's the problem here? We need some steps to mitigate and reduce the impact of this spirit of trauma that is pervasive amongst us, and in every melanin dominant human being, every black person suffers from this. Because it's called Maafa, which is the word that describes the West and world's most heinous crime perpetrated by Europeans and the pale Arabs upon a race that never attacked them, but was willing to share its resources, space, and time, and offered genuine friendship. And then they turned around, started to smash and enslave and colonize. So we need to acknowledge and understand this trauma. We need collective liberation, reconnecting with ancestral wisdom, healing practices, community support and solidarity, rituals of remembrance and reclamation, cultural revitalization, empowerment and agency, healing from historical traumas, and education and advocacy. All these activities, you can do it at a personal level, but we have to know how to connect and do them. So the first step is acknowledgement, and acknowledging the impact of our historical mistake of trusting our leaders, our Europeans, Arabs, and the traumas that they brought. You can condemn our ancestors, but the question is, what have you yourself done? Have you trusted these people? Are you following your leaders to try to learn Arabic, to learn Chinese Mandarin because your leaders are saying they are Chinese friends? Trust no one, whether the Chinese, whether the Russians or African politicians, because these people bring about into our community systemic enslavement, colonization, whether subtle or open. They also bring about the traumas that affect us at a mental and at a spiritual level, affect our education, our families, and societies, and passes this trauma across generations. We have to acknowledge this in genuine and in heartfelt rendition within us, and perform rituals to correct and mitigate this trauma. It's a spirit prevents us from reconnecting to our ancestral wisdom, because when you engage with African spirituality emphasizes totems. There is not even one black person who walks on the earth today who is totemless, because every black person or melanin dominant person has two totems, one from the mother and the other from the father. If not, it means the trauma has cut you off from your ancestry. You might want to find and discover your totem. You can send us an email on the website that we are showing here. So these totems will connect you with your past and all the bumpy areas of the trauma, and through totemic poetry, song and dance, ritual ceremonies and storytelling, it will regenerate your organic sense of continuity and guidance in strengthening the healing process. Then collective liberation. African spirituality is inherently linked to principles of justice, equity, and liberation. Healing from historical traumas involves addressing systemic injustices and working towards social transformation that uplifts marginalized communities. Ubuntu, I am because we are. That is the process. Ma'ati, truth, order, harmony, balance, morality, justice, and the law. Not only this, if we are challenged, African spirituality has its metaphysics, alchemy, voodoo, astrology, numerology, symbology, cosmology, obia, and calling upon the divinities to inflict isfed, equal revenge, equal measure of revenge. This is what we need. We cannot always be nice. There is a healing process within African spirituality. It offers a rich tapestry of healing practices, including herbal medicine, energy work, dance, music, and storytelling. These practices address the holistic well-being of your individuality and also your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions, and also group healing. Yes, it will do that. Then, community support and solidarity. Healing from historical traumas often requires the support of caring and empathic community. African spirituality fosters a sense of communal solidarity where individuals come together in Ubuntu, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and they share experiences, offer support, and uplift one another in any situation. Then there is the process of rituals that causes us to remember and reclaim the spirits of those that perished during the transatlantic slave trade, those that suffered during the untold horrors of Arabs who enslaved and traded us, and those that destroyed our ancestors in Far East Asia, the black Chinese and the black Asian. All these rituals will also consider those that were destroyed deliberately during the struggle, the first struggles, when our ancestors realized that the Europeans are taking over their lands and resources and committed genocide all over in Africa, and other instigated genocides perpetrated by these religions, especially Islam and Christians in Rwanda as well as in Darfur. These rituals, we need to perform them because these are our ancestors who perished during these moments and these periods. These are our brothers and sisters. We need to write their passage into the spiritual realm. Otherwise, our healing is not going to be easy. Cultural revitalization. African spirituality has cultural practices, traditions, and experiences, as well as expressions that revitalizes our own language, our arts, our music, and dance, and it helps strengthen our cultural identity and resilient in the face of historical traumas. By our identity of being an African, by being a Muntu, a member of the Bantu race, we are all melanin dominant human beings on the earth if we have that amount of melanin. Then because of that, we are empowered, and with our groups and agents that advocate through educating our mental status, understanding, and cognition of our identity, as well as our African spirituality that emphasizes these agents, which empowers us as individuals, as Marifado does, within the context of your community, your tribe, as well as your gender, age, and the position in life. And by reclaiming this spirituality and these practices, you have a cultural tradition that empowers you as an individual and causes you to be assertive in your autonomy and reclaim agents over your life and the lives of those that you want, as well as the narratives of life. So when we address these issues, we are correcting intergenerational trauma. And those that want to move to Africa, those melanin dominant human beings that want to connect with the motherland, those melanin dominant human beings that want to connect with their ancient tribes, they are given healing that has healed this trauma that we have inherited from the past and which we are building today in our present moment and into the future. So there is a lot of activities that we need to do. Many African nations today face challenges because even though they call themselves that they're independent, there is a lot of political instability, corruption, poverty, and conflict. These issues have exacerbated the existing trauma and hindered efforts at healing and reconciliation, because these post-colonial challenges instigated, especially like the French, who still tax Africa, and the impact of global racism and hatred against melanin dominant human beings means that as a race we face racism, discrimination, and systematic inequality in various forms, including police brutality, genocide, mass incarceration, economic marginalization, and cultural stereotypes that continues to foster African historical trauma. And no freedom can come when we forget that we are the hated race on earth, and then we try to appease and appeal and beg those that hate us to love us. It cannot be. It cannot work that way. We need applied knowledge, applied true knowledge that will heal us and speed up our coping mechanisms and survival strategies, as long as we question the status of our race at every point of our life. Then we are cognitively liberated, because when you are cognitively liberated, you have the power of critical thinking, the skills to be an intellectual, the freedom and the ability to challenge oppressive ideologies and the systems and subtle systems. These are the books that you need at certain times, and there are many more books that you may need. But Cultural Misorientation by Azibo, Dr. Jauda Azibo, and his African Studies in Psychology here, as well as the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. These are powerful books that you need to read, to adopt, and to use, as well as joining groups and movements like Marifad Family Network. If you think this is it, you feel you need to move that direction, and for more information, visit us on www.marifado.org. You can also visit our Instagram, promote our Instagram, share our Instagram with as many people as possible, marifado_US, and send us an email at join@marifado.com, so that together we can craft a compelling legacy as members of Marifado Family Network. It is important that you also subscribe, that you share, that you like, and that you leave a comment on our YouTube in our activities, so that you promote them and share with as many people as possible. Yes, African historical trauma is a spirit that is hovering over every melanin dominant human being who is alive today and who live tomorrow, and those that have lived in the past. And through these rituals that we have shared today, you have the potential, the power, the ability to mitigate and reduce it to a lower level. You cannot remove it completely, because the instigators of this trauma are still alive, are still with us, are still perpetrating this trauma silently, quietly, with a smile on their face. So let us be aware, be smart. Thank you. Your Hama Manager Togi Priest Rabbi LM says, we will triumph. Amen.